Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. So I'm going to be talking about man-made ideologies. There is a lack of realization within the Ummah that identifying as part of a man-made ideology is haram. There are established Muslim YouTubers who have done videos on these man-made ideologies, and I'll put links in the description for supplementary evidence. But in these two-part videos, I will set out the reasons why it is forbidden to associate with man-made ideologies and apply the arguments against some well-known ideologies. The first reason is that it could fall under blasphemy. And the reason why is because of this. If you follow Islam, you believe that it is the one true religion and therefore it is perfect. The moment you identify with feminism, red pill, liberalism, etc., you are inherently saying there is something flawed within Islam that you need to identify with man-made ideologies. By doing this, you are saying Islam is flawed and Allah is not perfect because Allah's rules create an imperfect religion. In Islam, to be a Muslim, you must accept that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is possessed of the utmost perfection and that Allah is above all shortcomings, no matter how small or insignificant. In the Quran, it also mentions that Islam is the perfect religion. Therefore, this is seen as blasphemy, as you are insulting Allah, and since blasphemy is seen as the opposite of belief, the consensus is blasphemy can take you out of the fold of Islam. The next reason is objective versus subjective morality. Man-made ideologies are subjective, whereas religion is objective. When you follow Islam, you are believing in a moral code which comes from Allah, and therefore outside humanity's internal viewpoints, which is therefore objective as humans cannot change it. Man-made ideologies are subject to the will of humanity and can change at any given point based upon human emotions or some conceived thought humans may have. Therefore, it is inherently corruptible. This reason, along with blasphemy, feeds into my next point. Distorting the religion. The follower of man-made ideologies want to distort and reinterpret the Islamic scriptures so they can make wild claims such as LGBTQ+ is permissible or any rules they believe is oppressive to women. This will lead to committing kufr, which is a part of shirk and it's a major sin and biggest sin in Islam. It could take under the two forms of kufr. Kufr ul-ishtihal, which is the disbelief out of trying to make the haram into halal. Kufr ul-istibdal, which is disbelief because of trying to substitute Allah's rules. Finally, negative impact. Another reason to show why man-made ideologies are haram is assessing the impact it has on the ummah. If these ideologies lead to negative behaviors on a Muslim and leads them away from acts of righteousness and obedience, then this shows how incompatible it is. Now that I have set out the reasons, let's look at some of the man-made ideologies prevalent in today's societies and assess them as case examples. The first one we're going to look at is democracy. Democracy is a system that gives the power of legislation to the people or to those who represent them, such as members of parliament. In a democracy, legislative authority is given to someone other than Allah, and what matters is not their consensus but the majority. Thus, what the majority agree upon becomes law that are binding on the nation even if it is contrary to common sense, religious teaching, or reason. In these systems, legislations have been declared allowing abortion, same-sex marriage, and interest, for example. The rulings of Sharia could also be abolished in Muslim countries, and things like fornication, adultery, and the drinking of alcohol can be permitted. There are those who have the opinion that Muslims in non-Muslim countries can vote if it leads to the lesser of two evils. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's say, for example, you've got two candidates. One would, if it was voting God's power, would allow same-sex marriage, and the other one would be still completely against same-sex marriage. You are allowed to vote for the particular person that will most align with our religious beliefs. Now, also in Islam, what happens is that there is an emir, who is an appointed person based on their ability to uphold and enforce Islamic laws, and that's how we pick leaders. Atheism. Atheism is an absence of belief in the existence of God or multiple gods. As they do not believe in God, this is a straight conflict with Islam. What is lawful is that their explanation for the creation of the universe does not disprove it could have been brought about by the divine intervention of God. The standard atheist theory is that the Big Bang was caused by a simple timeless point. It proposes that the universe began as a singularity, an infinitely dense and hot point of infinite energy. This singularity expanded rapidly, and as it cooled, matter and energy formed and organized themselves into stars, galaxies, and other structures. However, as Brian Cox pointed out, there is still a lack of concrete explanation as to what caused the singular point to suddenly expand, and that is a significant piece. In addition, atheists argue that perfect morality is possible without God. That means that atheists are capable of leading moral lives, perhaps even more than religious believers who confuse divine law and punishment with right and wrong. Political commentator Michael Gerson notes that whilst atheists can be good people, they just have no objective way to judge the conduct of those who are not. In other words, without God, without some objective morality, atheists cannot explain how they have an objective moral truth, and without objective moral truths, atheists have no grounds for saying anything is morally right or wrong. There are articles on Muslim Skeptic website that produce a detailed argument against atheism, which I advise people to go read. In addition, Muslim speakers such as Muhammad Hijab, Hamza, Muslim skeptics, etc., they all hold debates with atheists that expose the flaws within atheism, which I recommend watching as well. Liberalism. Liberalism is an ideology that places the individual and their rights as the highest priority and relies on the consent of the citizens for the legitimacy of government power and political leadership. One of its core principles is the harm principle, which in essence says you can do whatever you want so long as you don't infringe upon others in a way that hurts them or limits their freedom of action. Basically saying you don't harm anyone. There are issues arising from this ideology. Firstly, what would you define as harm, as different people have their own views on what is harmful or not? Some attribute it to just physical harm, others will span beyond that, so it has no concise position. For example, some will say that porn is ethical, whilst others will strongly agree. Liberalism, at its core, is fundamentally selfish, as your own wants come before the need of others. However, for example, what about obesity, as this does not fall under the physical harm or ethical harm, but it puts a strain on the health services, and we have to be so accommodating to these people who want to live an unhealthy lifestyle. If you are tolerant of everything, you stand for virtually nothing. It is an ideology that inherently flip-flops on its morality to appease others. To integrate liberalism into our society would produce liberal Muslims who are effectively very sinful Muslims that subscribe to the idea human beings are created free, and that if you take away or diminish freedom, you are in fact contradicting human nature. So they want us to tolerate everything and adhere to very few rules in Islam. You can see the effects of this in very little places such as the USA, where Muslims are progressing more towards relaxation on abortion, that goes against the guidelines of Islam, for example, forbidding interfaith marriages, Muslim women or Muslim women leaving Islam to do sex work, drinking alcohol, premarital sex, committing tabar rouge, and supporters of same-sex marriage. This is haram, as Islam has its boundaries on what is halal and haram, and we do not distort our religion to the amusement of disbelievers. In addition, as Muslims, we devote ourselves to Allah and are also tasked to ensure the integrity of the Ummah is strong, which cannot be achieved by focusing on your own selfish needs. But this is what liberal societies want, for the integrity of the Muslims to be undermined. Brother Hamza, in a video of Muslim Skeptic, mentioned that Dr. Shabir, after he passed away, made an interesting point in his book, Be Careful with Muhammad, that liberalism and secularism are designed to propagate themselves, and they do not have absolute tolerance. They have boundaries to tolerance and would only functionally and practically tolerate a minority if they become liberalized versions of themselves. So there would be no distinction between the minorities because you have gone too far to fit within their framework. Dr. Sabir also makes the point that Muslims should not tolerate the idea of being a subjugated, liberalized version of ourselves. However, I must stress this point. If you live in a non-Muslim country, you do not have the right to carry out punishments as per Sharia law. Muslims are generally obliged to abide by the laws of the land and the country they live in, whether it is an Islamic state, Muslim countries, or non-Muslim countries such as those in the West, as long as they are not ordered to practice something that is against Sharia. Shahid al-Bukhari 7144 states, a Muslim has to listen to and obey whether he likes it or not, as long as his orders involve not one in disobedience to Allah, and if an act of disobedience to Allah is imposed, one should not listen to it or obey it. Please respect the LGBTQ+ within those countries. Do not incite violence against them. Do not try to discriminate them. You have to respect that they are living in a country that does not share your views. You must exercise tolerance and respect. The final ideology we will be looking at, part 1 of this video, is secularism. Secularism is most commonly defined as the separation of religion from civil affairs and the state, and may be broadened to a similar position, seeking to remove or minimize the role of religion in any public sphere. Secularism and its worldview are nowhere compatible with the teaching of Islam, because in Islam there is no separation between politics and religion, and no separation between economy and religion. By detaching Islamic laws from your country, you are substituting them for man-made laws, which is kufr. As per Quran, Surah Al-Hadid 57:25, indeed we sent our messengers with clear signs and sent down with them the book and the balance, that people may uphold justice. We have multiple verses telling us to enjoy what is good and forbid what is bad. Therefore, the rules in Islamic country should be as per Sharia law. Secularism, like liberalism, will lead towards catering to non-Muslims who do not respect our religion and believe their moral framework is superior to ours. An example of the degeneracy that secularism will have is, for example, with Tunisia abolishing the law preventing Muslim women from marrying men outside of the faith. They did this to pander to feminists and Western countries when they should have stood by the religion. So secularism falls under the sin of kufr ul-istibdal, which is disbelief of trying to substitute Allah's laws. This could take the form of rejection of Allah's law without denying it, denial of Allah's law, and therefore rejecting or substituting it with man-made laws. But that is now part 1 of discussing why man-made ideologies are haram, and in part 2 we will be assessing both feminism and red pill.